During the will reading, Grandpa's lawyer handed me a sealed envelope with my name misspelled. My mother smirked and said, "That's fitting for someone who never bellinged here." When I spied on her later, I heard her tell my son, "She's too weak though." Fight for anything. I held back tears. My next move turned the family hierarchy on its head. My parents lost more than just control that night. My sonny finally saw who his real mother was. Is from my mother? She's not laughing anymore. Welcome to cheat sheet tales where loyalty dies. Lies bleed out and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag? When it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. My family name carries weight where I'm from Old Charleston, South Carolina. The Bellamys are what you might call legacy wealth. Think sprawling historic estates, century-old business ventures, invitations to exclusive galas, the whole Southern aristocracy vibe that outsiders both envy and despise, but like most families. With long money, what lies behind the iron gates and brick cottages often far uglier than what the public sees. Growing up, I never quite fit into the mold. My parents, Roy and Margot Bellamy, had very specific expectations: debutante balls, Ivy League degrees, a high society husband, and an eventual place beside my mother in the charity circuits. My younger sister Violet stepped perfectly into that role. She married Chandler Mallister, a polished, smug real estate developer who embodied every trait my mother worshipped. Together they were Charleston's golden couple. I, however, deviated from the script early on. I got pregnant at 22 before marriage with my college boyfriend, who bolted as soon as responsibility knocked. My parents were mortified. They wanted me to give the baby up to pretend it never happened. Instead, I kept my son. Oliver. Raised him on my own and worked tirelessly to support us both. I finished my degree, took a modest job at a local historical foundation, and kept me head down. My family, in turn, treated him like an embarrassment they had to occasionally tolerate for appearances. The only exception was my grandfather, Edmund Bellamy, the true patriarch, a self-made man who expanded the family fortune through shipping. He never cared about the pageantry. He respected hard work and honesty. And while he rarely interfered, he always made sure Oliver I knew we were seen and valued. At least by him. When Grandpa Edmund passed away last year, at the age of 89, it felt like losing my only true ally. I attended the funeral mostly for Oliver's sake, knowing full well what awaited me in the coming weeks: the reading of his will, and my family's inevitable greed on full display. The will reading took place in Grandpa's grand study, inside the family estate where I hadn't been invited in years. The heavy oak bookshelves, the polished mahogany desk, the faint scent of his old pipe tobacco, it all brought a lump to my throat. My parents sat side by side, dignified and expectant. Violet perched next to Chandler, her manicured hand resting perfectly on his arm. My Uncle Wallace was there too, with his equally ambitious second wife. Distant cousins filled in the remaining chairs, every eye calculating, every minority dividing the spoils. I sat quietly with Oliver beside me. At 17, he was nearly grown tall and lean, his eyes flickering between nerves and resentment. He knew how his grandparents had treated me over the years. He knew too much for someone his age. Mr. Lell, Grandpa's longtime attorney, began reading the will. It was fairly standard, specific bequests to charities, a trust fund for the Family Foundation, minor sums to distant relatives. Then came the bigger pieces: ownership of the estate, business holdings, financial assets. As expected, most of it was dividend between my father, Violet, and Uncle Wallace, a generous nod to Violet ensuring her status. Uncle Wallace got control of some old shipping interests. My father retained his position as head of the family trust, and me, a small inheritance enough to appear in the document, but not enough to make waves. Just as my mother always intended. But then at the very end, Mr. Lell paused. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small sealed envelope. "There's one additional item Mr. Edmund asked me to deliver directly to Sylvia." He handed it to me, glancing quickly at my mother, as if anticipating a reaction. My heart immediately dropped. As I saw the envelope, my name was spelled wrong: Saliva Bellamy. Before I could even process it, my mother's voice, syrupy and cutting, filled the room. "Well," she said with a smirk, "that's fitting for someone who never really bellinged here." The room chuckled softly. Even Violet hid a smile behind her perfectly painted lips. My father didn't say anything. He rarely needed to. His silence was its own form of cruelty. I didn't respond. I simply slipped the envelope into my purse and kept my face neutral. I knew better than to give them satisfaction of a reaction. That evening, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the day pressed on me. I walked the halls of the estate, the same halls I used to run through as a child. The voices from the solarium carried into the quiet hallway. I recognized my mother's voice immediately. "She's too weak to fight for anything," she said. "Always has been. That's why Edmund left her nothing. That's why she's a failure." And then, to my shock, I heard her address Oliver directly. "You deserve better than being dragged down by her." My breath caught. My mother was trying to poison my son against me, right under my nose. My hands balled into fists. And for a brief moment, I contemplated faltering her right there. But I didn't. I waited until Oliver walked away from the conversation, probably uncomfortable, confused. Returned to my room and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note, shaking slightly in his elderly script. "Sylvia, if you're reading this, it means they've already tried to erase you. You've always been my true heir. Whether they admit it or not, there are things hidden that they don't know about. Go to the vault behind my studies bookshelf. The combination is your birth date. Trust, Mr. Lel. Love, Grandpa." My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might wake. The house. I knew about the vault. He had shown it to me once, years ago, after teaching me to play chess in this very room. But what was in there? And why hadn't it been mentioned today? I barely slept, rehearsing every scenario in my head. The next morning, I approached Mr. Lel discreetly, away from the prying eyes of my family. I handed him the note. His eyes widened slightly as he read it. He looked around and lowered his voice. "Come with me, now." We snuck into the study like two conspirators. The heavy bookshelf slid aside easily. Once we found the latch. The steel vault door gleamed behind it. My birthday opened it. Inside were file boxes. Dozens of them. Mr. Lel pulled one down and opened it carefully. What we found inside was beyond anything I could have imagined. Inside the vault were files that could destroy everything my family had carefully constructed over decades. Mr. Lel flipped through page after page, his face growing graver with each one. "My God," he muttered under his breath. I scanned financial ledgers, notarized statements, recorded deposit slips, legal agreements, evidence medically compiled and hidden. There were records of fraudulent transactions, massive sums siphoned from the family foundation into offshore accounts, wire transfers disguised as charitable donations, sham real estate deals funneled through Chandler's development company, manipulated audits, bribed inspectors, and all of it tied back to my mother, my father, Violet, and Chandler. But that wasn't even the most damning part. At the bottom of the stack sat a legal document, a fully updated, signed, notarized will dated less than 6 months ago. In it, Grandpa had revised his entire estate plan. Nearly everything: the house, the shipping business, shares. The family trust was to go to me. And Oliver was named as primary beneficiary of the long-term trust that held most of the liquid wealth. The very people who'd mocked me at that table the day before were supposed to receive nothing big, effectively been disinherited. He must have known they would try to suppress this. Mr. Lel whispered. "I never received a copy of this. They must have intercepted everything after his death." My stomach twisted. "Do you think they already know about this will?" Mr. Lel shook his head. "If they did, they wouldn't have been sitting so smug yesterday. Probably assumed he never got around to changing anything." I could hardly believe it. "So this is legally binding?" "Absolutely, but we'll need to move carefully. They will fight. This kind of fraud, this level of theft could land them all in serious legal trouble." For the first time in years, a strange, unfamiliar feeling crept in. Power, not rage, not desperation, not grief. Pure, cold leverage. I glanced around the study, the old portraits, the polished wood, the heavy silence. All my life, this room symbolized a world I was never meant to inherit. And yet here I was, standing in the center of it. "They've called me weak for years," I said quietly. "But now, I hold everything." We spent the next few days quietly gathering copies, scanning documents, and filing the updated will with probate court. Mr. Lel handled everything with surgical precision. Discretion was critical. The last thing we wanted was for them to start covering their tracks, or finding creative ways to hide assets. I remained outwardly polite at the estate, playing my part. I joined Violet for morning coffee in the garden, pretending to admire her plans for re-landscaping once she officially took ownership. I listened. As Chandler boasted about a new waterfront development project that was guaranteed to triple the family's portfolio value, I watched my mother meet with interior designers, already discussing how she wanted to remodel the library. The entire time, my son watched them too, quietly, cautiously. And at night, after everyone went to bed, Oliver would sit with me in my guest room, asking questions. For years, I had shielded him from how cruel my family could be, but now I allowed him to see glimpses of the truth. "They really don't care about you," he said one night, anger flashing behind his brown eyes. "Or me, I took his hand. That's why we have to be careful. We're not playing their game, we're rewriting it." He nodded slowly, and for the first time I saw it in him and my father's stubbornness. My mother's coldness, but pointed in a very different direction. Toward protection, toward loyalty, toward me. The court date came faster than I expected. It was surreal walking into the Charleston County Courthouse that morning. My parents arrived first, dressed impeccably, as always, faces painted with calm confidence. Violet and Chandler flanked them like royalty entering a coronation. They clearly expected nothing more than a routine confirmation of the will read aloud weeks earlier. They didn't notice Mr. Lell quietly sitting beside me, with his briefcase thick with documents. The hearing began. Judge Mallister, a stern, no-nonsense woman in her 60s, presided over the case. When Mr. Lell stood and calmly submitted the updated will into evidence, you could have heard a pin drop. My mother's smile froze. My father's head snapped toward me. Violet's jaw twitched. Chandler narrowed his eyes. "Objection." My mother finally barked. "This is fraudulent. That document was never part of my father-in-law's estate plan." Judge Mallister barely raised an eyebrow. "Counsel, your objection is noted, but I will review the validity of this submission." Mr. Lell, composed and meticulous, began laying out the evidence, the notarizations, the witnesses, the forensic analysis of Grandpa's handwriting, the unbroken chain of custody, the date stamps. Then came the financial documents, the fraud, the embezzlement, the secret accounts. As each piece landed, my mother grew more visibly shaken. My father whispered furiously into their lawyer's ear. Violet stared at her hands, while Chandler's face rained as if calculating escape routes in real time. "This isn't real," Violet finally snapped under her breath. "This isn't possible." Oliver sat next to me, silent but alert. His eyes flicked between each family member as they're carefully constructed. Facade crumbled. Judge Mallister took her time reviewing everything. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I find this updated will to be valid and legally binding. Furthermore, the financial evidence presented here warrants further investigation. I am formally referring this case to state prosecutors for potential charges of fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." My mother's gasp was loud and sharp. Violet clutched Chandler's arm. My father went utterly still, as though calculating how far he could fall. The hearing was adjourned, but the chaos had just begun. Outside the courthouse, the press was already gathering. Whispers circulated quickly in Charleston's tight, gossip-hungry society. The Bellamys weren't just losing control of the estate, they were facing public humiliation, criminal investigations, and the slow, horrifying realization that their reputations were now toxic. For days afterward, I received frantic calls from various family members. Some begged, some threatened, some even offered quiet payoffs to make it all disappear. But I said nothing. I let my attorney handle every single interaction. Oliver, watching it all unfold, grew more and more protective of me. Every time my mother tried to contact him, I could see her influence slipping further away. "She can't manipulate me anymore, Mom," he said one evening as we sat on the back porch of what was now officially our estate. "I see who she really is." His words were simple, but they filled me with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I knew it wasn't over yet. The investigations were just starting. The unraveling of decades of corruption would take time, and while my parents had lost their grip on the estate, they weren't entirely done fighting. Not yet. The days that followed felt like I was living inside a quiet, brewing storm on the surface. Everything remained polished and civil. The estate sat bathed in Charleston's early autumn light. as beautiful and intimidating as ever. The Spanish moss swayed gently from the oaks. The iron gates still gleamed. From the outside, no one would suspect that inside those walls, the Bellamy family was splintering like old wood under pressure. The financial investigation moved faster than I expected. The forensic accountants tore through years of my family's business dealings like wolves through fresh meat. Subpoenas were issued, accounts frozen, key associates interviewed. My mother and father stopped calling. Violet sent a few frantic, guilt-laced texts at first, half-hearted attempts to appeal to sisterhood and family unity. I ignored them. She eventually went silent when she realized I wasn't playing. But Chandler surprised me late one evening, about a week after the court hearing. He showed up at the estate unannounced, uninvited. I had just finished helping Oliver with some college applications when the doorbell rang. Seeing his figure through the beveled glass of the front door sent a chill down my spine. I opened it anyway. "Sylvia," he said smoothly, like a man who still thought he held power. "May I come in?" I said nothing but stepped aside, let him talk. He walked in, glanced around the grand entry with its sweeping staircase, then turned to face me. His smile was tight, controlled. "Let's cut through it," he said. "I know you're angry. They treated you like garbage for years. You were the outcast, the unwanted one, and now you have all of this." He gestured broadly to the house, the grounds beyond. "But you have to understand something. None of us expected Edmund to actually rewrite the will." "How?" I didn't think the old man even trusted his own pen anymore in the business dealings. Well, they weren't exactly clean, but that's how these things work. Everyone in Charleston cuts corners, you know that. I crossed my arms, let him keep digging. He lowered his voice then, leaning in slightly. "You've won. Sylvia, fine, but you need to be smart about how you play this next part. You don't want to burn it all down. Think of Oliver's future. Think of your reputation. If you make this whole scandal public, it's not just us that gets ruined." He smiled again, this time more like a predator. "It touches you too." There it was, the veiled threat, the attempt to make me feel complicit, as though I was somehow responsible for their crime simply by being part of the family. I let a beat of silence hang between us, watching his eyes search for any hint of weakness. "You're right, Chandler," I finally said softly. "I am thinking about Oliver's future. That's why I'm not letting any of you manipulate me anymore." His smile faltered, just slightly. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. "You should be more worried about your own future, because from what I've seen in those files, you're the one who signed most of those fraudulent real estate deals. Your name is on nearly every wire transfer." His jaw clenched. "You've always been very efficient, haven't you?" I added, almost conversationally. "Creating fake shell companies, bribing city officials to get development permits pushed through. I have to say, you're very thorough. Almost like you thought no one would ever check." He tried to recover his smugness. "It's not too late for us to make a deal." I smiled cold. "It is for you." And I shut the door in his face. Oliver came downstairs just after Chandler left. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Was that who I think it was?" I nodded. "He's getting desperate." "Are they all going to end up in prison?" Oliver asked quietly. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But they're all going to face consequences. Real ones for once." In the weeks that followed, the social fallout began to eclipse even the legal troubles. The Bellamy name was whispered in every corner of Charleston's elite society. Invitations dried up. My mother's cherished position at the Preservation Society was quietly revoked. The charity gala circuit, which she had once ruled like a queen, now treated her like a pariah. Violet was humiliated. Her so-called friends started keeping their distance. Chandler's business partners began distancing themselves too, quietly removing his name from development proposals and joint ventures. Meanwhile, I stayed out of the spotlight. I refused interviews, declined speaking to reporters. I let the investigation and the documents speak for themselves. The house, which had once felt suffocating, slowly began to feel different. Mine. I made changes. Subtle ones, asterisk, asterisk. I sold off a few unnecessary pieces of artwork. Pieces my mother had acquired for their name rather than their meaning. I hired a new staff, people who treated me like a human being instead of a stain on the family name. I even opened up portions of the estate for historical tours, a tribute to Grandpa Edmund's true passion. and a slap in the face to the legacy my mother tried to hoard like treasure. But under all of this, I knew the worst wasn't over yet because desperate people do desperate things, and my mother was nothing if not desperate. About a month after Chandler's visit, I got a call from Mr. Eliel. His voice was tense. "Sylvia," he said, "I need you to be careful." Asterisk. What happened? There's been some movement. Your mother's attorney has filed a petition to challenge the updated will. On what grounds? Forgery, mental incapacity, coercion. They single quotes reclaiming your grandfather wasn't of sound mind when he made the changes. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Of course not, I should have seen this coming. They're going to drag this out. Asterisk, try to bleed you dry. With legal fees. Try to create doubt. They don't have a case though, right? Legally, no doubt we have overwhelming documentation, expert testimony, video evidence of your grandfather meeting with me to discuss the will changes. But public perception can get muddy. If they can't win, they'll aim to ruin your reputation instead. He paused before adding, they're trying to wear you down. I almost laughed. For years, they assumed I was weak, timid, soft. A single mother with no backbone. They had no idea how much stronger I had become because of all those years surviving on my own, raising Oliver without a single ounce of help from them. They won't wear me down, I said quietly. Not this time. Not long after that, the media attacks began. Subtle at first. A columnist hinted at unseemly disputes within the Bellamy family. Amakolas baby if the media attacks began. Subtle at first. Columnist hinted at unseemly disputes within the Bellamy family. Gossip blog speculated that I had manipulated my aging grandfather in his final months, leveraging his grief and confusion for personal gain. The word gold digger appeared once, attached to an anonymous source close to the family. I knew exactly where these whispers originated. My mother's fingerprints were all over it. The media whispers escalated into a low but constant hum throughout Charleston. Some of my grandfather's old social peers withdrew their polite invitations. Few longtime family friends stopped returning my calls. The insinuations painted me as manipulative and calculating. A woman who took advantage of an old man's failing mind. I knew my mother was behind every one of them. This was her last-ditch strategy. If she couldn't win in court, she'd try to bury me in public shame, but I refused to retreat. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of living on the outside of my family, it was patience. Mr. Lell and I stayed 2 steps ahead. Every false accusation they made public lies, countered with documented evidence. We provided the court with medical records proving Grandpa's mental clarity in his final months, records signed by doctors they themselves had once hired. There was also a series of private video recordings my grandfather had made, recordings Mr. Lell had wisely archived, where Grandpa clearly stated his intentions and his growing disgust toward my parents' behavior. The most powerful recording was the one where Grandpa said plainly, "They have tried to make Sylvia feel like nothing her entire life. If anyone deserves to inherit what I built, it's the only person who never expected anything from me." When that recording was played in court, even Judge Mallister's normally stoic face softened slightly. The court challenges crumbled, one after another. But the part that brought me the most satisfaction wasn't the legal win. It was watching their carefully constructed world implode. Violet's social life deteriorated rapidly. The same women who had once adored her slowly turned their backs. Invitations to fundraisers dried up. Even casual luncheons disappeared. In Charleston, your name is their currency. And hers had become toxic. Chandler's real estate empire collapsed under the weight of criminal investigations. Several of his developments were exposed as fraudulent, leading to a cascading failure that cost him millions. Investors pulled out. Partnerships dissolved. His name was blacklisted. My father, the quiet, calculating patriarch, he retreated from the public eye entirely. Forced to resign from multiple foundation boards, his financial misdeeds were laid bare.